John McClain, Hall of Fame columnist with us, 365 Sports. John, we were mentioning the story about Jalen Carter and Drew Rosenhaus. He's not going to visit anybody unless they have a pick in the top 10. Is that kind of status quo, or is that a little bit unique?
I think that's a little bit unique because, say if Tennessee, which has the 11th pick, called him and said, well, we might want to draft him and play him next to Jeff and Simmons. Can you imagine? Because they drafted Simmons when he had big-time baggage where he had hit a woman. Well, it turned out that woman was swamping on his sister, and she was a lot bigger. And he shouldn't have done it. There was video of it, but they liked him, and they convinced the owner, Amy Adams Strunk, it was not going to be an issue, and it hadn't. He's been a great player. So I think if a team just outside the top 10 wanted to talk to him, of course, it could be arranged.
John, do you think they're trying to, will it into existence that he's still – I don't see him falling out of the top 10 either way, but it's not like he gets to pick where he goes if he falls out.
I don't think he's going out of the top 5. I think Seattle with the 5th pick, needing defensive players desperately. Last year, Seattle had a fabulous draft, the best in the NFL. They got a running back. They got 2 starting offensive tackles. They got a great corner, and they want to build a front 7, especially the pass rush. Well, they proved in the past they'll take anybody. They don't care about character. And so he would be perfect for Seattle at 5. I think if he got down to the Bears are desperate for linemen on both sides of the ball. There's some really good offensive tackles, but he's higher rated than any of them. But I've had Seattle. My 4th mock draft will be out this week on GallerySports.com, and I may stick with Seattle taking him at 5. He's just too good for Pete Carroll to pass up, knowing how they want to build their defensive line. A lot of people haven't taken Tyree Wilson, and maybe indeed they will, and he's a good prospect, but he's not the prospect that Jalen Carter is. But Carter, you don't just worry about issues off the field. You worry about him being in shape. He was not in shape at his pro day, which is pretty stupid. And but there's a lot of prospects who had problems in college, especially with hitting women. Tyreek Hill, Joe Mixon, Kareem Hunt, those guys. And once they got to the NFL, they didn't do it. They took a lot of criticism for giving them Frank Clark was another one, kicked out of Michigan State for beating up his girlfriend. And once they get to the NFL, there's a lot of criticism of them, but none of them has had, a relapse. None of them has done it again that we know of. And so that's why I think Jalen Carter, he was racing, and 2 people were killed, and he was not charged with a felony. I think that somebody's going to take him. Arizona needs defensive lineman at 3. Will Anderson Jr. has great character. He's great edge rush prospect, and Jalen Carter's a great interior prospect. And I don't think he'll be there outside the top 10. Philadelphia at 10, I'm sure they'd take him. They took Jordan Davis, his teammate, last year, but I think you're dreaming if you think he's going to get down to 10.
John, I've seen a lot, and I know it's just draft talk and it's social media, so I'm not putting a ton of stock into it, but it did pique my curiosity. There's an obsession, or at least Twitter is the algorithm has put it in my face constantly. Bijan Robinson and the Eagles, Bijan Robinson and the Eagles. Would they take him top 10? Is he that kind of an elite running back prospect, or anyone for that matter, or is he still probably most other running backs where you're looking at maybe a bit farther down the line?
Bijan Robinson and Will Anderson might be the 2 best prospects in the draft.
Fair enough.
Everybody's got him in the top 5. There's nothing he can't do. Great character, hard worker. You guys watched him. He can catch the ball as well as most wide receivers. He's fast. He breaks tackles. He has great elusiveness, and he can line up in the slot, line up at wide receiver. He can start in the backfield and go in motion. And I don't know many linebackers that can cover him. Philadelphia let its leading rusher, Miles Sanders, leave in free agency. They got 2 backup running backs. They like to run the football. They don't want Jalen Hurts running as much as he does. So the best thing to do is take the best back by far. That would be Bijan Robinson.
John McClain, Hall of Fame writer. NFL draft is just at the end of the month, and of course, it's coming down the tracks. Paul?
John, speaking of Bijan Robinson, I mean, it's the Cowboys' dream for him to fall to 26. If Austin Eckler gets traded, then he probably doesn't fall past 21 in the Chargers. The Buccaneers at 19. So, I mean, like I keep thinking of teams that would take him before, but the Texans at 12, like I know they have other pressing needs, but if he was there, I mean, they're running that wide zone offense now that with DeMeco Ryans there. Would it be crazy if they took him?
Yeah, they're not going to take him. They have Damian Pierce, who they loved last year as a rookie. They signed Devin Singletary, who started for the last 3.5 seasons for the Bills in free agency to rotate with Damian Pierce. So as much as people would like to have him there, and anybody thinking he's going to fall to the Cowboys, man, I got some real estate I'd like to sell him in a suburb here. Reach out, please. And there's no way he's dropping to Buffalo. No way he's dropping to Dallas. And they had to trade up too far to get him. You know, there's a team like talk about New England, Tampa, all those, but it wouldn't surprise me if somebody didn't trade up to get him because he's a can't-miss prospect. Now, Saquon Barkley, what did he do for the Giants till this season? He helped them get in the playoffs. He's had a major knee injury. Was he worth the second pick? No, he wasn't worth the second pick. But I think once you get past the top 5, you get great value on Robinson. If Robinson played in another era, he'd be in the running for the top overall pick.
John, which way are you leaning for the Texans right now?
I'm having them take the quarterback who's there, and I think that would be Bryce Young. I got the Panthers going with C.J. Stroud, and I'm writing a column right now about everybody's talking about the Texans with the second pick. That's all they're talking about, but they got the 12th pick.
Right.
And they got needs. A lot of mock drafts have them taking a wide receiver like Quentin Johnston. I don't. I have them taking an edge rusher. And then they had the 33rd pick. They have 5 of the top 73. And the third, they need a center. They need a wide receiver. Great value of wide receivers in the second and third round, but also great edge rushers for a team needing edge rushers in case the Texans did take a wide out with the 12th pick. I believe they'll trade down a little bit. They've got 12 picks right now. They won't end up with 12. Last year they had 12 and ended up with 9, but I think they're going to go quarterback, edge rusher, wide receiver, and the next one will be a center.
So, on the subject of quarterbacks, I mean, it appears that, Young and Stroud are kind of the guys, obviously, and they'll be gone very quickly. But then there's your Will Levises and your Anthony Richardsons and so on. Where do you kind of picking up around the league as far as the rest of that group goes beyond Young and Stroud? And maybe was what's going on in Baltimore or elsewhere, does that, change things in your mind as far as the quarterback crop goes?
Well, I don't think that Lamar Jackson's going anywhere. Maybe after the draft, the team doesn't get the young quarterback prospect, but still, it's not so much next year. If you wait after the draft, you don't have to give up a 1 this year. Indianapolis, if it doesn't get the quarterback it wants, take a player like Jalen Carter and or trade down and take an offensive tackle. And then after the draft, then sign Lamar Jackson to an offer sheet. You got to figure he's a great regular season quarterback. He's won as many playoff games as Trevor Lawrence won, but he's only 26. So do it for next 2 years when you figure your picks are going to be a lot lower, somewhere around 20 or even lower than that. So that would be much more value. But then you've got to come up with the money. And somebody wrote, well, he doesn't want a fully guaranteed contract. He just wants more guaranteed money than Deshaun Watson, $230 million. I don't see anybody doing that with him. We haven't heard anything about any team sniffing around an offer sheet. And everybody knows he's doing himself a disservice not having an agent at a time like this. When you're a player like Laramie Tunsil and you're negotiating with one team, in this case the Texans, in 2020 they made him the highest paid offensive lineman in history. This year they made him the highest paid offensive lineman in history. He had 3 guys advisors. He paid by the hour. That's one thing. When you're fielding calls, supposed to be fielding calls from teams, talking to them about contracts while you're trying to work out and make sure your knee's okay, that just makes no sense to me. And anybody thinking Levis or Richardson especially, Richardson playing one season, being up and down and falling in love with him in shorts and a T-shirt, you're just asking for disastrous results.
John, Anthony Richardson to me would seem to be good to a team that has some time to season him, but that's probably not going to happen, is it?
Well, okay, Indianapolis has a new coach, and he's got a 5-year contract. Arizona doesn't need a quarterback, but they got a new coach. What you need is a coach who has a 5-year contract, or he's in the second year of a 5-year contract. You have a system in place that fits his skill set. If you have an offensive coordinator who has different kind of offense, you're just spinning your wheels. You need a patient owner. You don't want an owner who's firing coaches every 3 years. That means a new system, new technology. He needs stability. Go in there, learn a system behind a veteran quarterback, and then play a little bit in the second year and see how far he is. But if you do that, and that second year he struggles because he's like a rookie since he only played one season, and then the third year he turns out like Jameis Winston or Marcus Mariota, the first 2 picks in 15, well, then if he doesn't work out, you've set your franchise back another 5 years. So it's got to be somebody stable. Everybody's got to be on board, head coach, general manager, offensive coordinator, and the owner, if they're going to take a chance on a great physical talent with very little experience.
John, the men's national title game, which, of course, last night UConn won and at times pushed a little bit near the end, but they won and rolled through the tournament. Houston had a lot going on, and they obviously had a massive crowd there at NRG. Where was that on the scale of, like, other events going on as far as importance for Houstonians?
Well, the Astros played last night. I went to that. You know, they sold all those tickets before the Final Four got to town, and I'll guarantee you from what I'm told, it looked like they had a great crowd. They did in the lower level. They kept it darked out. In the upper reaches, you could get a bad ticket for $30 to get in there. And can you imagine what it would have been if Houston or Texas were in there? Thing about UConn, they are the premier basketball program in the country. They're better than Kansas. They're better than North Carolina, Duke, UCLA, all the blue bloods, because it's right there on the scoreboard. And yet, because they left the Big East and then they went back and they tried to appease football, they don't have the pizzazz as those other programs. People here were feeling so sorry for Houston getting stuck with the 4 teams that they got stuck with, even though one of them is the best team in college basketball going back to 1999. And I tell you, is that more people have been talking about the women than are talking about the men because UConn was such a blowout. And I think the controversy with Angel Reese and Caitlin Clark's best things ever happened to women's college basketball. And then Kim Mulkey. Kim always creates a lot of controversy around her. I was asked on one of my shows the other day, she's changed. I said, what? She hadn't changed. She changed her wardrobe to look like she came from Mardi Gras.
Amen.
But that's it. She coaches the exact same way as Baylor. She's intense. She berates the officials. She's up and down like a jack in the box. And I think that's great for college basketball, great for her. I've said before, I think there should be a statue of Mike Singletary outside McClain Stadium, the greatest defensive player in history, to go with the greatest offensive player. And I think at the new building, they'll never do it.
Don't say
they
it.
should have
Please don't
the new
say
building. They should have Scott Drew and they should have Kim Mulkey statues outside that building.
Well, John, they might have had someone not chosen to do what she did.
Hey, she won 3 national championships for Baylor and put Baylor women on the map back when Baylor's programs were horrendous. I was going to say horse. Let me say horrendous. And I was there I was watching all of them. So I don't care why she left, who's mad at her, or what. She was one great coach who did the great stuff for Baylor locally and nationally.
Is it who's mad at her?
And I've
or
never even met her.
I've
never even met Kim.
Is it who's mad at her or who she's mad at?
Well, that wouldn't get him. What's she going to say? I don't want a statue.
Right.
I can't wait.
Oh, no.
I can't wait.
In fact,
so when she and Baylor play each other, it'll have to be in the tournament, of course. Can you imagine the interest in that game?
God, it's
That's the thing is like
she campaigned for basically everything you said she should get, all with some sort of honor, whether it's the court or the center or whatever else. But that's a completely different story. Craig, go ahead.
I mean, that's the thing is that eventually her ego is going to bring her back to wanting some honor of some sort for what she did here. You know that's inevitable.
Oh, I think she still does. Yeah. I think that. Yeah, it's.
I mean, those paths will cross again at some point, somehow or another, for sure.
It won't be
The
anytime
Maravich
soon.
Center is going to be the multi-center.
Yeah, and they got to renovate that. I talked to Mike Scarborough, who covers LSU, and there's really they're not sure they can. It's an older place, and there is room somewhere on campus, but it's so tight, just like it would have been if they would have built the new Farrell Center around where it is now, and that's why it's where it is. And that was another point of emphasis about where the pavilion's being built. It's state of the art. It's going to be wonderful. And there would have been names on the court of both Scott Drew and Kim Mulkey, but that's, again, something that didn't matter. Thank you, buddy. Appreciate your – you're
Thank
Craig.
you, guys.
No, hold on. We got one more.
I got one more, John. A little baseball for you. Yordan Alvarez, fastest player in Astros history to 100 home runs, almost at a 1 in every 3 game clip, which is ridiculous. I mean, there's been a lot of great Astros players. Some of them are on this current team, but just the rise of Yordan Alvarez over these, I guess, recent seasons. What's that been like to watch, against the backdrop of the Bagwells, the Biggios, the Altuves, et cetera? Just what kind of a niche has he carved out in Houston?
Craig, I was there last night sitting on the second row behind home plate. You could tell as soon as you heard the bat with your eyes closed that was a Titanic home run. It hit off the facing of the second deck. It wasn't like in the World Series when he hit it over the batter's eye at center field, but every time he comes up, you can't take your eyes off of him. And when they kept him out 2 games ago to rest him, it's like, oh, what a bummer. It's like going to see the Lakers without LeBron, but it's a long season. He's been great, and they tell me he is a tremendous person, and that's why they like him even more. I often wonder if Jeff Bagwell, who had almost 500 home runs in the Hall of Fame, had not played most of his career in the Astrodome, the spacious Astrodome, how many home runs would he have hit in Minute Maid Park? He might have had 600.
Yeah, that's true. Thanks for your time.
Thank
John
you,
McClain.
guys.
Yes, sir. Hall of Fame columnist, GallerySports.com, and also Houston 610, and with us on Tuesdays in the 5 o'clock hour.
Yeah, I hadn't really given much thought